Welcome to the Point Loma Church podcast. We are back with a new series to complement our Sunday sermon teaching, Earthwise, God's Call to Care for Creation. And we are inviting professionals from our very own community to share their experience and explore how environmental stewardship is an act of justice, discipleship, and hope in Christ. And today, we have the privilege of getting to hear from actually one of the speakers in this series, Philippe Lazaro. Hello, Philippe. How are you? Thanks for joining us. So Philippe spoke, and if you want to hear his message, you'll actually be able to link his message in the show notes, but we can talk about that later. So we want to kind of follow up, not necessarily talk about totally what you talked about, that'll kind of come in, but we want to hear more about the man behind the message. So first of all, Philippe, how did you get into this work of storytelling? Not necessarily Plant with Purpose, but how did you get into the work of storytelling?
Yeah, I think basically I always wanted to work in the world of international development. Okay. Probably before I knew that was what it was called.
Okay.
And I had some opportunities to travel pretty early in life and loved it. Loved getting to interact with other cultures, other people. Found out that there were ways to keep doing that while also solving big problems that were out there, or at least being part of it. And yeah, that led to my discovery of the nonprofit world, organizations like Plant with Purpose.
Okay.
Started studying the things that I felt I needed to in order to not miss that opportunity, and thankfully it led me to Plant with Purpose.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that in just a second. So international development, like what was there something as a kid what drew you to, I guess, other countries and learning about them and what they're doing and whatnot?
Yeah. Honestly, it was probably just the joy I got out of being in a totally different context and having to learn it, or interacting with people who had such a different background from my own, and
right.
Sort of all the odd things you find that don't match up but are kind of humorous to me, those
yes.
sorts of experiences. And so it was really positive, which is great because, you also encounter really hard things through this work. And this is kind of an odd meeting ground of those two things, of addressing hard things, but through something I enjoy doing.
Yeah. Last on one of our episodes, we had Chase Mahan come in. We were just talking about like the weirdness of different cultures, how we're all like have our own like foibles and weirdness and like unique, and just it sounds like that's something that you want to learn and hear about and tell the stories of. So did you? Were you a storyteller first, or it sounds like you were a discoverer first, but then in that you developed the storytelling? Did you major in communications in college? Or
communications was one area, so I kind of cobbled together what I thought was the combo to get me where I am, and it worked out. But yeah, I had a comms degree and an international studies degree. Those were kind of my tracks. So. Okay. It adds up, but I think I was a storyteller before I was aware that would fit in somehow. Like, I would go places and I would just enjoy sharing what I encountered, and having good stories to tell was one of the the best kind of souvenir you could bring back from going somewhere. And the more I found out that it could go beyond just telling the silly things that happened to me, but I could also be part of sharing different experiences from other parts of the world with people who might not get to have those same encounters, making the world a bit smaller that way. Made me realize, there is a way that it could fit into the work I do too, and not just the hobby.
Yeah. Now tell us a little bit about Plant with Purpose. What exactly is Plant with Purpose?
Yeah, so...
I love the name, by the way. It's just like, it kind of explains itself, but tell us a little bit more.
And we're a very holistic organization, meaning we have a lot of areas of work that all kind of meet in the middle. But those areas, namely, are environmental restoration, economic empowerment, and spiritual renewal. I kind of explained this in my sermon, but just to go over it, a lot of poverty around the world is caused by environmental factors. You have 85% of people below the poverty line living in rural areas, relying on smallholder farming. So when you have a climate crisis, when their crop yields are impacted, poverty only gets worse from there. And the interesting thing is that so the environment can make poverty worse, but poverty can also make the environment worse, in that people often end up resorting to things like charcoal production, which requires you to cut down trees.
Right.
Clearing more farming area just so that they have more to work with, but that disrupts more soil. And a lot of farmers are aware of these long-term trade-offs, but don't have the ability to think long-term under their circumstances. And of course, it all takes a spiritual toll. And sort of the big philosophy behind the organization is it's all about mending broken relationships. So relationships between creation and creator, between people and each other, and neighbors. And so by healing that, you work on one part and it starts to allow for healing in all. The cycle works both ways.
So what the work you do, it takes a lot of time. Obviously, you talked about one village is about to graduate, I guess, from your program, right? And it's like 14 years. How long?
So it's actually a watershed that our church has been supporting. I think we started roughly around 2019, 2020.
Okay.
So that's about, 5 to 6 year time frame.
Okay.
I think right now I'm saying that the average tends to be 7 to 12 years.
Okay. From when Plant with Purpose meets with a community and
they hit that point of graduation.
Okay.
Correct. Right now we're actually doing an intensive study to really determine what is that optimal time. We're comparing different lengths of time and, if the changes last, just so we could figure out how to best align our resources and work with communities. And when they hit that point of graduation too, it's not that everything just ends, but it does mean that the community's at a spot to continue the work completely on their own and even play a leadership role within that region, being an example to neighboring communities.
Okay, so so that's on the back end when the graduate, on the front end, how do you determine this community's in need? I mean, obviously there's a lot of communities that have need, but how do you say this is one we're going to invest in? Is there a criterion they have to, I guess, attain or meet, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, the big one is we're looking for where poverty is really linked to the environment, really linked to agriculture. That said, that doesn't really narrow it down that much, because I highlighted that's about 9 out of 10 cases of poverty around the world.
Totally.
We're working in 9 countries now, and while I'd love to expand more, we also look at what's the next area to work in within those countries where we have established offices and local partners. One thing we've uniquely specialized in is working on really steep hillsides. So you might have noticed in some of the photos I showed, but a lot of the land that the farmers we work with have to work on is not like our farmland. We think of our farming states as the really flat ones in the U.S.
Yes.
And it's almost the opposite. In a place like Haiti, oftentimes the more impoverished a person is, the more likely they are to be on a nearly vertical patch of land. The choice land goes to the wealthier more typically, and so that makes those farms really vulnerable for soil erosion. When heavy rains come, it can wash out all the nutrients in one's soil. And the thing about climate change is it does cause drought, it does cause a lack of rainfall, but it also means sometimes when the rain finally arrives, it comes all at once and in a really irregulated fashion.
Right. We see landslides in California. We're familiar with that, but imagine that being a person's farm. Oh gosh. Okay. So now when you talk about, obviously, so the time that it takes to see the results, what parallels do you see in your own faith in that journey that a community goes from beginning to end? How about you and your own faith? How does that parallel you and your own walk with God?
That's such a good one. One thing I love about our work, and one thing I love about my role in particular, is I get to deal with the direct testimonies of our participants.
Right,
so I'm reading in their own words them describe what their experience was like. And a common one is this discovery that they're realizing that their faith has a relevance to their day-to-day lives. It has a relevance to to how they're treating their farms and their nature. It has relevance to how they live within their families and with their communities. And it's not uncommon where people have this taking down of the walls of realizing, I've been a Christian my whole life, but now I know this isn't just a Sunday thing, or this goes beyond going to church and doing the things, but it impacts my daily decisions and how I get along with my neighbor or not. And for me, that's a big part of it too. I think there's this big idea that I had this phase where I was big into studying Jesuit ideas, and one of the big underlying ones was finding God in all things, is, their catchphrase or whatnot. But that seems really true to me, is just in these areas of life that sometimes seem so random and mundane, where is God in these things? And so seeing how our farmers are applying that to their lived experiences, I get the encouragement to do that in my life in a very different context.
Oh, that's very cool. So speaking of faith, does Plant with Purpose only work with Christians, or are people introduced to Christ through the work? What comes first, the chicken or the egg in this?
Great question. Yeah, we don't work exclusively with only Christians.
Okay.
We work in a variety of settings. And Thailand in particular is one of our countries, and the country is less than 1% Christian.
Okay.
And so, the exact makeup would vary a lot based on where we work, but nobody needs to be a member of anything in order to join, or even within Christianity, there's a lot of broadness. We have members of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and Catholic community members, and other denominations come together.
Right.
So there's no prerequisite. We do have a spiritual renewal curriculum that's rooted in Christian ideas around the theology of work and farming and our relationship with creation and whatnot. But people are just welcome to join as they are. There's often just a very organic exchange of beliefs and ideas, as you would see whenever you have people coming together of different beliefs and backgrounds. And so it can be a good way to learn and discover, but through relationship.
Right. So there's, so like in a place called like Taiwan or wherever, like they don't mind that it's Christian. They're just kind of like, whatever's going to help our people. And you're kind of like, whatever helps people be able to flourish and thrive and become independent communities that, and hopefully no longer be in poverty is kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we have people, I've read testimonies from people who say, like, I've been a Christian my whole life. This gives me an opportunity to apply that to my care of creation. Mm-hmm. We have people who say, hey, I'm still not a Christian, but I've experienced love. I've experienced care through the people in my purpose group. And it's, made a big impact in my life.
Mm-hmm. Is there one, this is kind of a random question to go off of that. Is there, I guess, maybe one religion maybe that you found that's like, wow, they really get the that connection to environment? Or do you feel like that's found in Christianity? Do you feel like that's, the Buddhists really have it down, or what I'm saying? Like, is there, in your work and your interactions with different cultures and different even religions, have you found that?
For sure. I mean, speaking from my own standpoint, I can speak to Christianity the most easily, of course, but it's really baked into so many, core concepts in Christianity. The way the Bible starts and ends in a garden, and that's the whole story arc right there, is getting back to the garden and the redemption of all things.
Yeah.
I also find it so fascinating. The more you study something like soil science and the way, microorganisms break down dead matter to produce new life, feels like, the whole resurrection story is just
totally,
in dirt. It's just right there.
Yes.
So there's plenty of ties. But then the more you engage with other faiths, other beliefs too, you also find that this is present widely. You're right. Buddhism does have a lot about cycles and our relationship with nature, and finding the livingness of other things. Hinduism as well. So
which would make sense.
Widely.
I mean, the other religions were kind of, it's all about the pursuit of this this God, whatever they call it, outside of ourselves. And so there is that. It feels like it always does come back to that earth idea. But I love that Eugene Peterson, he talks about, when you talked about organisms breaking down and bringing new life, Eugene Peterson in one of his books talks about this idea of like manure, and it's the stuff of death. But what do you throw on your garden? Manure, because it knows, and within that death, there's, living organisms that are vital to life. So that's kind of cool. So we had a Chase Mahan on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about the idea of like the importance of oral traditions in communities. And so you're probably not part of communities where they're passing around videos, but yet you're making videos of these communities, right, that are probably steeped in oral traditions. So how does like the video and the digital world, how does that enhance, like better help the oral tradition? And then how does it maybe even block or change oral traditions within communities? That's kind of...
Okay, this is kind of a funny side answer, and I don't know if it's going to be a direct answer, but
bring it.
I've caught word of some of our partners creating like mini telenovelas to help better reinforce some of the principles about regenerative agriculture that we promote. So it does play a role, and especially with my role, I do a lot of our digital communication, our media, and so I always create things with the understanding that this very well ends up in front of our partners on their phones at the end of the day. A lot of this technology has gotten more accessible, and people have it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a great reminder to always make things that dignify the people we're telling stories about. That's important regardless of who's watching, but it's a good reminder that, yeah, oftentimes it does make its way back full circle.
And I always wonder if, because well, first of all, when you go into a village that probably doesn't have access to a lot of video, my guess is, are they like, whoa, or are they looking at the cameras like, what is this? Like, how do they look at you when you come in with your crew? I mean,
there can be some of that. That's actually a big piece of my role and a thing I try to do. So over the past few years, I do a lot of trips to our field and I bring a lot of camera crews. I've started trying my best to hire camera crews from that country, which is sometimes easier than other times. It depends on where we're going. But it does a lot to, put people more at ease. Oftentimes that person ends up doing a bit of translating on the spot.
True.
They just have a better understanding. I get really uneasy when sometimes like you bring a camera crew that's just so focused on just getting the shot, but it creates an awkward interaction. And so, I've also worked with great camera crews from outside, but I've found finding one from within the country or a local partner has gone a really long way.
Yeah. So how long have you been with Plant with Purpose?
Almost a decade. Yeah, coming up on 9 years.
That's crazy. So how has working with Plant with Purpose influenced your own, view of the environment at home? Like, and how you, how has it changed, or how has it influenced it in such a way? And then what are some things that you've done differently at home because of your work with Plant with Purpose? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of lit a fire, meeting people who are the most climate vulnerable in the world. It raises the stakes of everything. You feel kind of the weight of, just the challenge that climate change is more acutely.
Right.
At the same time, though, I would say even though it raises the stakes, it also raises your awareness of solutions, of hope. And, if you see a farmer in Haiti has not given up, you're like, well, what excuse do I have to kind of throw in the towel or take a, only a doom and gloom stance, So it does kind of move you to just that sense of dread to maybe urgency, but with action. So for things I do in my own life, I try and look for ways on the margins to, improve my carbon footprint and that sort of thing. Everyone as an individual is limited, but even those individual choices impact things like what's consumer demand around a certain product, what tells companies like where public interest are, that sort of thing. So things I've tried to do are eat lower on the food chain. And you know what? I love...
Just what do you mean, eat lower on the food chain?
So basically, the higher up you go, if you're eating, just what's a large animal, cat, beef, namely, like that has the highest carbon footprint, partly because of the animal, but also just the amount of land that it takes to raise cattle and such. Chickens are a bit lower, and then if you go like more vegetarian, that's... further down. And so generally, the lower on the food chain you go, the more carbon friendly your diet gets. Now, I'm a person who loves, it kind of goes with my love of travel, like just discovering all kinds of food and stuff. And I love eating very broadly.
Right.
I found that like, it doesn't take
much. I like
much
the way you put that.
to cut out, the bits let's just say like beef or meat that I'm not as enamored with, I tried doing like taking it out. I started with like 1 day a week, and that moved up to 2 or 3, and found that like if I treat it more as like a special occasion, and that still enables me to graciously receive things when I'm traveling and they're brought out to me. But so it's not just like a black and white approach, but just, I think if a lot of people move towards reduction rather than a handful of people moving to like an all or nothing purity standard, I think you would accomplish a lot more. So that's one example.
Yeah, because I think when you hear, that's interesting because reduction feels more attainable than I'm just, because sometimes when I hear you speak or when I've heard Carla speak or just other people where like I feel this great conviction, it's just like, I need to leave it all. And what am I doing? My life is the worst. And you feel kind of almost shame, but where it's like, okay, let's go reduction and be a little more like wise in the things we do or what. That feels more like, okay, I can do that. I don't know. It feels I don't know. It feels, I don't know. Better is the right word, but
so.
It's more attainable.
I do think that sometimes all these well-intentioned and good pushes towards better environmental decisions can create sort of its own purity culture in a way where if you're not able to do it all, like, what are you doing? But like I said, just more people moving in that direction gets us somewhere rather than just a handful of people who are able to take the more extreme measures.
Right. So on the scale of despair and hope, in your work, where do you fall in this in that as far as like for the when you think about the environment and like where we're heading as a globe, as a universe, whatever, where do you fall?
I mean, there's a lot of times where it just feels like you're laying down across the entire spectrum and hitting all of it at once. I'd say, I'm probably more on the hopeful side. I think just by nature of birth or whatever, I'm a more optimistic person. That's just always been my tendency, even for, things unrelated, sports or whatnot. I just have that bias. And so I am on the more hopeful side of the spectrum. But with that said, I actually have so much heart for people who are not on that end of the spectrum. I often think of people I've worked with, folks who say, like, I am not as optimistic about you as things, but they're showing up every day. They show up anyway. And I'm like, if I show up and I generally have an easier time feeling hopeful, and you show up and you don't, like, it takes you that much more to get out of bed, like, you're kind of lifting the heavier weight here. And at the end, what matters is just, did you show up? Regardless of how you felt about it, that's kind of going to determine what happens. And so, I have a lot of respect for people who push through that.
Right. So here we go. Last question.
Yeah.
What is like the worst or most unique or most adventurous travel situation you've ever like been in all your travels? You travel a lot. So what's like the one where you were just like, oh my gosh, this was just terrible, or like the most adventurous, like this was way off of the, agenda itinerary? Has there been something where you got stuck in a place for 3 days or whatever? I don't know. Is there a story you could tell about your travels?
I have so many, but I'm trying to think of, were you looking for a plant with purpose one?
It could be, plant with purpose, ideally. Just kind of a fun story in your adventures.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking most recently we visited a bunch of communities in Thailand and whatnot, and we were driving. It's funny, we asked to go during the rainy season. A lot of our hosts are like, wait, why? And it's so that, we're aiming to film people planting trees, so we need to go when trees are actually being planted, which means rain. And just the drive down to some of these communities, first we put mud chains on our truck. Like, I've never seen that before. It's just snow chains, but not for snow.
Right.
And as we're going down, a lot of us were piled in the back, and just the experience of driving down this road with like trees hanging overhead and having to move out of the way of these branches felt like being in a real live video game. And so I had one of my teammates just been like the whole time was like, I can't believe this is my job.
Yeah.
I'm like,
oh my gosh. And then it's like you have that Jeff Goldblum moment in Jurassic Park where you're just like, is a dinosaur going to come out?
I'm trying to remember if we just thought about it or if someone actually pulled up the Jurassic Park soundtrack on their phone, because it just fits so well.
That's amazing.
So there are moments like that. I try and have as much fun along the way as I can, because these are really unique and special opportunities we have especially when we get to visit our partners.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, is there anything that you want us to know about Plant with Purpose, or anything that you want us to know about like the environment, or is any closing thoughts, or is that you did this? That's all I have for me on my end.
No, I mean, if you haven't checked out Plant with Purpose, do check us out, plantwithpurpose.org. Like I said, if you're trying to look for like a simple act of good in the world to do, planting a tree for $1 is about as friendly of an entry point as it gets. And like I said, like just picture a parched piece of land. Picture, 50 more trees on there that weren't there before. And just imagine being in the shade of those 50 trees and how much big of a difference that would make. I think just visually picturing that speaks volumes. And we're closing in on 100 million trees too. So
I know that was great. When you said that 90 million, you planted 90 million trees, so $1, I'm like, wow, that's awesome.
Well, it's kind of impressive. Just 3 years ago, we did a push to celebrate 50 million trees, which means that the rate at which we're able to plant has ticked up exponentially a lot.
Do you think is that people just becoming more conscious of it? People wanting to feel better about themselves? Why do they,
globally, there's a lot of that going on around tree planting. With Plant with Purpose, a lot of it is just organizational growth. We've been in a good season. We've made a lot of new contacts and have a lot of great people on our team who've kind of been a part of that. A lot of great supporters too have helped give strategically in a way that's enabled more growth. So,
and the tree suppliers, they're local to the community.
They're grown usually in nurseries of our own farmers.
Okay.
And so, that might be a cool thing to plug. I made a whole video about kind of what's unique about the way we do reforestation. There's so many different ways to plant trees in other countries, but the way we do it is through community designed restoration. So making sure that the local community is not just involved, but really driving it, and that leads to a better survival rate and more ownership of the trees. So
that's awesome.
I'll check that out.
Well, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. So we'll put the Plant with Purpose, website. We'll put your YouTube channel on the in the show notes, so you can go check out all the work and all the stories that Philippe and his crew is telling. You can find out more about Plant with Purpose. And if it's not Plant with Purpose, find something that is like trying to put things back into the earth so that we can care for this earth better. So thank you, Philippe, for coming today. And if you would make sure you like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. You can go to Point Loma Church Online, or you can go to youtube.com/Point Loma Church Online. So however you want to do it, or on our Apple or Spotify or iHeart, whatever podcast you're listening to, make sure you rate and review. And the only reason we have you do that is that it makes it easier to find, and we can share it with more people. So thank you, Philippe, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.